Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Silmarillion Film Project. This is session number 624, session number 24 of Season 6. Tonight, we are going to discuss Episode 8 of Season 6. So, in our previous discussion, we went over Episode 7, which is a climactic episode. That is the confrontation between Luthien and Sauron. Really sort of the turning point of the season in a lot of ways. So that was a big one, right? And not only that, but we had a great mortality of major characters, right? Not only did we kill off the entire rest of Sauron's squad, right? We killed Draugluin and we killed Thorin Gwethel. But then we also booted Sauron out, and of course, then for good measure, killed Finrod Felagund. So it was a weighty discussion next time. So tonight's episode is, it's the aftermath, right? It's the aftermath of that major confrontation. So of course, in a lot of ways, it's a sort of a lower profile moment than that, but I have been actually looking forward to this one because this is one of the ones that I have had myself most questions about, and I don't just mean most questions about in the sense of how are we going to handle it, or most questions about in the sense of what exactly is the script team thinking. Instead, when I say I've had most questions, I mean most questions from the original text. Like, what, places where I feel I have to fill in the gaps, and I'm not quite sure how. Like, because this is one of the places in the Baren and Luthien story, when I look at the story as Tolkien presented it, which is not trying to fill in all of the psychological gaps, it's not trying to tell us what everybody on the ground is thinking and doing at all times, but how do these characters get from this point to that point exactly? What is going on in their heads that made them take step A to step B? The narrative just gives us the steps, step A and step B, right? How do they go from here to there? And exactly what's going on here. And of course, what I am referring to primarily is the Fëanorians in Gondolin. I'm talking about Celegorm and Curufin. So tonight we're going to talk about the sequence that leads to their getting booted out of Nargothrond, which is there were two parts of Celegorm and Curufin's time in Nargothrond that I never really myself fully feel like I fully was able to inhabit imaginatively reading the Baren and Luthien story. And those parts are like the whole part. Basically, it's like how they came to power and why they lost that power. Neither one of those things ever felt like intuitive to me. And again, the story, in Tolkien's defense, the story's not interested really in telling us that, right? I mean, we get a little bit. We get some gestures at it, like Curufin is extremely charismatic. Good. That's important. It's good to keep that in mind and everything. But anyway, so one of the fun things about doing this adaptation project is we get to settle down and look at those kind of gaps and say, what exactly is going on here? And so I was delighted to find, so after teasing them already, I will say I was delighted at what I saw from the script writing team to find that this episode is like following Celegorm and Curufin. It's basically the Celegorm and Curufin episode, that Baren and Luthien are themselves sort of minor characters in this episode, which I think is like we need at least one episode to really sort of sit down with our Fëanorian friends and see what exactly is going on here. So anyway, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm excited to fill in that gap. And I think that should be pretty cool. Before we get too deep into things, however, let me introduce briefly Nick Palazzo and Marie Prosser, our head writers who are here with us this evening, whom, if I had been as practiced at doing this intro as Dave, I would have introduced right off, but forgot to do so. Dave couldn't be with us tonight, so I'm subbing in on the intro front. But quick announcements, 2 upcoming moots I wanted to make sure that people knew about. The spring regional moot process is underway. I've just, of course, recently come back from Australia, where we had our first ever Oz moot. Got to hang out with several awesome film folks. Not only was I being hosted by Ilana Mushin, who's one of our new script writers from this season, but also got to hang out with Philip Menzies, our composer, who brought his piano to the moot so that he could perform. He gave a presentation on his work on the Aino Indole, which is really, really fun. So anyway, it was just great. And I'm particularly grateful to Philip because Philip, our composer, it turns out, is also a bit of an amateur astronomy buff, and so gave me a tour of the southern skies and introduced me to the strange stars when I was down there. So it was very cool. We went on a river ferry, so we're on a boat looking up at the stars, and he was showing me the Southern Cross and Alpha Centauri and the South Celestial Pole and all these other things. Not to mention, like, the things that were even weirder, like Orion upside down and the Man on the Moon upside down and and stuff like that. That was super weird. Like, they just stared at the moon. It was in a crescent, so I couldn't see. It would have looked even stranger, I think, if it had been closer to full. But like, the moon upside down looks weirder than you might think. Like, that was a trip.
Do you know what you have witnessed is physical proof that the world is in fact mostly spherical.
Mostly spherical, exactly. Yeah, no, it was cool. And even Sirius, the dog star, up in the middle of the dome of the sky. I mean, it was cool. It was awesome. So anyway, had a great time in Australia. We had a wonderful Osmoot there, and we're now preparing for 2 of our American moots. Sunshine Moot in Orlando, Florida on March 18th and Tex Moot on April 15th. I've been joking and calling it Tax Moot, but it's not actually Tax Moot. It's Tex Moot down in San Antonio, which we've never been to San Antonio before. Anyway, both of these 2 moots coming up here in the next couple months. Really excited for both of those. Want to, of course, particularly recommend Sunshine Moot, which is our next one coming up pretty soon, so check that out. Also, we've just launched, and next week we'll drop the first installment of my new book, Exploring the Lord of the Rings, Volume 1. So my first installment, I'm writing. So my original plan was to write 1 chapter for each of Tolkien's chapters. That didn't happen. It was just way too much. So
that was a pipe dream, sir.
It
might not have been for some people.
It made sense based on my previous experience, which was my Hobbit book. But it turns out, and this might surprise people, the chapters of The Lord of the Rings, they're a little longer and more complicated than the chapters of The Hobbit. There's really more going on there. And so, turns out, yeah, that's not working. So, I'm going to average about 3 chapters per chapter in the end. Including, it turns out, 3 chapters on the prologue, which is where I'm starting. So, on his prologue to the Fellowship of the Ring, I'm doing 3 chapters. So my very first chapter 0.1, which is my first chapter on the prologue, which is called Finding Our Roots. And I'm talking about the very remarkable thing that Tolkien does in the prologue in establishing the relationship between his story and his modern readers, his story and our world. And I'm going to be talking about, like, the notes on Shire records and all kinds of really fun stuff. Tolkien's retconning of The Hobbit and how he presents the retconning of The Hobbit. Really, really fun. So anyway, all those things I'm talking about in my first installment, and that installment will be dropping next week. So how this is going to work is that every month a new installment will drop. I'll be doing basically like a chapter a month. It's going to take me a while to write this book. So you have a couple choices if you would like to read my Lord of the Rings book. Choice number 1 is that you could, like, pre-order it and wait for like 3 years for me to finish the book, or you can subscribe and then you can get the installments as they come out, and you can be keeping up with it as I go and maybe even have some input. So Anyway, the subscription is super cheap. It's $2 a month to subscribe to the book. So if you go to BlackBerry, blackberry.signumuniversity.org, and then go through into the Signum Press area there, you'll see some links, and you can find my book and subscribe to the book. $2 a month to get monthly installments of the chapters of my book for the next few years until I finish writing my book on book one, which of course, so I'm going from the prologue to the fight to the ford. Anyway, so that is what is happening. I've been really, really excited about that. I was writing on chapter 1, and then I decided that I really should go back and write on the prologue. So I actually did that on my Australia trip. So the chapter that I'm dropping was written on the plane, my favorite place to write, while I was over the Pacific. So that was awesome fun. Anyway, all right. So let us move forward. We are focused on this narrow part of Beleriand. So we're like between Nargothrond and Tulsirian, basically, though we're involving Doriath as well indirectly. Like, I don't think any of the parts are going to take place in Doriath, right? But it's going to be.
I should have put Nargothrond on the section of the map. I cropped it a little too far this time because we do have scenes in Nargothrond, but not in Doriath. You're right.
Right. But we are going to be like Mablung and his crew are going to be involved in that. So
correct.
We are going to be thinking about Doriath, even if we won't physically be there. Okay. All right. So, the Leap of Beren. So the title of the episode is The Leap of Beren?
Sure.
That's probably, is that like just like how you guys have been referring to this episode, basically?
That's the main thing from the text that people are going to remember that happens in this episode. It's the most famous
single event, yeah.
If someone comes up with a better title, I'm certainly willing to entertain.
It's one of the main things in the story of this episode that we didn't 100% make up.
Right. Because this episode is all about filling in those blanks that I was talking about before. Right. So, yeah. Yes. It was funny. So I'll tell you my first reaction. I actually forgot that episode. I kind of in my head combined episode 8 and 9. Episode 9 is the Baren and Luthien figure out the status of their relationship, right? So like episode 9 is the one like unofficially titled like It's Complicated or something like that, right? But in my head I combined this episode and that episode, right? So when I first saw the title, The Leap of Beren, I was thinking that the title was attached to that process as well, right? When Baren makes it, I'm like, that's a really clever title, actually. And then I was like, oops, wait, no, that doesn't happen in this episode. So, oh well, it kind of spans the two. So we call this one The Leap of Beren, and then episode 9 we can call The Other Leap of Beren. Anyway, probably not.
If you want to save the title for the next episode, we might be able to come up with a better one for this one. It'll just
also,
be then really confusing to the audience.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say it'd be a great way to confuse people, especially when like the titles of the episode, if the title of the episodes get released in advance, right? Everyone will be confused. So no, we probably shouldn't do that. But okay. Anyway, all right. So we've got our 3 plots as usual. Our A plot is Celegorm and Curufin. The trials and tribulations of Celegorm and Curufin. The B plot, Mablung seeking Luthien. So the squad, the army, basically. How big, by the way?
A significant force.
It's got to be. It's got to be enough that it would be a viable threat. Where they couldn't just ignore them. Right.
So it wouldn't be like a squad of 15 dudes. This would be. But he's also not emptying Doriath either. So somewhere.
No.
Yeah.
But probably a couple thousand guys.
I could easily see that. Yeah. This would be a force you would not want to just ignore. Yeah.
Yeah. We started out the season by having Celegorm and Curufin show up at Nargothrond and camp out with all their guys. And that was a pretty significant thing to have happen. This is a bigger force.
Bigger force than that. Yeah.
Mablung is coming from a much closer area. He has access to a much larger army. Right. So even if it's only a portion of Doriath's force, it's a bigger group.
Yeah.
But if I were a betting man, and I were betting on the odds between Celegorm's heavy cavalry plus whatever Nargothrond could throw out there after the Dagger Bragalok against the forces of Doriath, even if it's just a small, especially since like a small-ish expeditionary force in comparison to what they can field in entirety.
Right.
My money's on the Noldor.
Well,
we know what happens when you take the Fëanorians versus Doriath.
Well, yeah,
we
do have some spoilers on that front. Yeah.
Like that's not a hypothetical. So
right.
You're right,
That's true.
Nick. The Noldor win
That's
that
true.
one. If by win you mean everybody loses.
Well, yes, that of course is the other thing
that's the challenge
traditionally associated with the Fëanorians, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, but that's the challenge here is that everybody knows what happens if this gets out of hand.
Yeah.
Nobody walks away from this a winner.
Right.
Maybe Celegorm doesn't know. Curufin probably at least knows that much.
I'm sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't want to jump ahead too much. We'll get there. C plot, the dwarf point of view. Now, I'm going to guess that I wouldn't be the only person to come to the dwarf subplot here and say, oh, yeah, there were dwarves. What were they? They were doing something. Right? That was totally me when I was coming into to this here. So that'll be good. It'll be good to review that. And I want to make sure I'm seeing the significance of how that ties into the A plot at the very end, right? The way that it did. So we will see how that goes. And then just briefly touching on the frame, Gilrain playing matchmaker. This has to have come up, right? And can I just say I really like the fact that we're depicting Gilrain as being like responsible, and unlike the enormously and inexcusably irresponsible bachelor dudes of the Lord of the Rings, right? Like Theodred and Boromir and Éomer, who have no excuse to not have tons of children and heirs already. Yes, that Gilrain would be like, so, you're of age, you know who you are. Now, let's get on with continuing the line, shall we? Is a perfectly sensible thing for Gilrain to be doing, so that makes a lot of sense. Anyway, but that's all we're going to talk about the frame. We're gonna talk about the frame more. You guys on the script team have been kind of like putting like pins in, right, to kind of map out a basic story for the frame. But we'll kind of put that together and kind of go through it, maybe flesh that out in some ways in a future episode, but not tonight. Okay, so these are the things we have to review. Do you guys have a preference? Which plot you'd like to talk about first? No?
Dealer's choice.
Okay, dealer's choice. I will say, I kind of like to save the A plot for the end, because I feel like if we get involved in it, we don't get to anything else. But of course, that is always a strong chance with the thing that gets saved for last. So, let's do B plot, then A plot, then C plot. That's what I want to do.
Okay.
Especially since
you'll have to rearrange your slides then, because they're not quite in that order.
I can do that. Yeah, that's all right. That's all right.
I did push the A plot back. I was like, you don't want to do this one first.
Right. Oh, well, okay. Actually, Baren and Luthien. That's not even one of the plots. So let's talk about Baren and Luthien first. That was a very sensible choice there on your part. Look at that. You did actually guess the order I wanted to go in. It is in the right order. Look at that. You read my mind in advance, Maria. That's amazing. Okay, let's do Baren and Luthien. This is the part where you're not just reading my mind, but informing it, because I would have forgotten about this completely. So, Baren and Luthien, minor characters in this episode. We're going to see a little bit of them, certainly when we get to the actual Leap of Beren and the everybody throwing themselves in front of Luthien to protect her sequence and all that kind of thing. So, what are the primary... It's it's an interesting move, right? That Baren and Luthien are reunited for the first time since episode 4. So there have been 3 whole episodes of them apart, and their being apart during those 3 episodes is of course a major focus of those 3 episodes. And then we reunite them at the end of episode 7 in the former dungeons, right? With Luthien now remembering Baren in the oubliette, and then there we go, right? But so now to move from that and basically kind of not focus on Baren and Luthien's character is kind of bold, right? To sort of like, and now Baren and Luthien, the central thing of the entire season, like, we're bringing them together at last and never shall they be parted again. But let's set them aside for almost a whole episode here and talk about Celegorm and Curufin instead. I'm not saying I don't love it. I'm just saying it's a gutsy kind of move. And so what are your thoughts in like how we handle Baren and Luthien so as to not make it seem like a sort of a really bizarre choice, if you see what I mean?
Part of the hope is that we're setting up the next episode.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and
it's going to be about the relationship primarily.
And therefore, what's happening for the audience in this episode is the aftermath of what immediately happened. So our main focus with Baren and Luthien is at the very beginning of the episode where they're dealing with Finrod's grave, which wasn't
burying
shown.
Finrod. Yep.
Right. So we have to show his grave. We have to show some evidence of dead Drogluin and Thuringwethel. We have to say goodbye to Huan, who's going to leave them at this point.
Right.
So we're kind of wrapping up all of that.
In the company, you guys had him leaving in the company of him escorting the freed prisoners back, right?
Right.
To Nargothrond, which, as I recall, is not explicitly said. I mean, like the people from both Huan and the refugees arrive back in Nargothrond in the text. I like that little connecting detail that says Huan is gonna herd him back like a faithful sheepdog, or he's gonna protect them anyway.
Something to do, and kind of explained why he goes back to Celegorm right there,
right?
Without him having to use words.
Yes.
So we were trying to make his storyline make sense, because Huan in this episode is gonna make a pretty important decision, and we wanted to see that he wasn't there yet at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, and so we have a whole little mini arc for Huan within the shape of this episode, right? At the beginning of the episode, he is still sufficiently tied to Celegorm in his loyalty that he wants to go back to him. And then he's going to turn from him by the end of the episode. So, yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. So are we going to, I imagine since Huan is not speaking in this episode, that we're going to have to do at least a certain amount of what's that, boy? You're heading back to Curufin or to Celegorm, right? I mean, somebody's going to have to speak out loud what he's actually intending at some point, probably, without making it too lassie to be acceptable.
Well, you have to find that balance where he's going to be doing things with agency, and then the people around him can be like, what's this? And you can figure it out from there. So the prisoners who were in Nargothrond don't know who Huan is, and they could react to him with some level of fear before Baren or Luthien could be like, no, he's a good dog. He'll take you back to Nargothrond. He just came from there. We could have some dialogue that points to what Huan is doing.
Right.
If we needed to, without someone being like, so Huan, you're doing this now, right?
Right. Yeah. Yes.
But so the Baren Luthien part at the beginning is that set up and aftermath, and just okay, we did that. The next part of their storyline is them figuring out that they're not on the same page. So at first it's just oh, thank goodness we're together and we're reunited. Like you said, we'll be together forever now. And like, oh, it's so sad about Finrod and we have a whole mess to clean up. Like and didn't get any further on the quest. Like there's still problems, but at least they're together.
Yeah.
What happens next? They have very different ideas because they haven't sat down and talked about it at all.
Yeah.
And we're not going to do anything with that until the next episode. But just bringing them to that realization is something that happens in this episode.
Sort of asking the question, essentially, like, what do we do next? And just acknowledge that they don't necessarily really know what they're going to do next.
Right.
It's going to be hard because, like, the more we spell that out, the more we're just pre-gaming for next episode, right? Because we don't want to raise too many questions we don't have any intention of answering.
Well, the real question for the next episode is, are they on the same page about getting married? Are they on the same page about fulfilling the quest? So the questions they're asking here are more like, no, literally, where do we go next? What direction are we walking in?
Right.
So
assuming we're not going to stay in this lovely place.
Right.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
Baren is thinking, well, I'm still headed towards Angband, I guess. And Luthien's like, well, we can go wander in the woods again, I guess.
Right. We don't have to go north. Here we are. Yes.
Yeah. So they kind of decide to head towards Brethel before they get intercepted by Fëanorians. Yeah.
Right.
But that's a temporary solution.
Yes. And
like they didn't really answer the question and get to it. So it just raised oh yeah, what are we actually trying to accomplish here?
And so just to so I went back to the map here just to sort of show people it is kind of a big decision. That is because, I mean, Angband and Brethil are in opposite directions from each other, from where they are. So to say we're going to head towards Brethil is not like a compromise exactly. It's not exactly well, let's go somewhere that's on the way to both or whatever. It's definitely turning your back to Angband and the quest and headed in the opposite direction, at least for now.
Right.
So that's just to kind of make sure that the significance that is inherent in the geography of that decision is sort of made clear to everybody there. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. But the idea is not to spend too much time on their discussion, right? How many scenes do they get?
They get the first one at Tulsirian. They'll have two separate conversation and traveling scenes.
One of which is actually intercut with another conversation.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And then the confrontation with the Fëanorians.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And that's it.
One is like the bonus Baren and Luthien scene.
Right. So they'll be in every act of the episode. We're not going to lose track of them, but they're not driving the story.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that certainly, it seems to me, the most difficult challenge with Baren and Luthien is saying enough but not too much. Like, how do you establish the issues without, and then still say, but let's not go into that right now, right? Because we're saving that for the next episode. So I could see that being awkward, potentially, to try to walk that line.
Yeah, that was one of my concerns when we were looking at the outline of the season, was that we have several episodes which are basically just Baren and Luthien figure some stuff out, and we had to, season 2 Arwen slow walk them through a couple of things, and have them focus on very, very specific scopes of decision making.
Yeah. Okay.
But you're right that the idea of reuniting them and then not spending time with them can be very frustrating for the audience. To be like, no, we finally got them together. I want to see what's going on with them, and we keep cutting away. So.
Right. Yeah, I wonder how.
Well, I think the awkwardness actually helps with that, like having them be kind of at odds with each other about what they're going to do. That's gonna feel a little uncomfortable, and we're kind of playing with that in a way, which I think is going to help mitigate kind of the desire of the audience to stay with them. They're like, "Ooh, this isn't going the way I thought it was going to go at all." And it's not going the way that either of them thought it was going to go. They kind of thought that, oh, wow, now that we're together, everything is going to be like it was when we met in Doriath. And no, there are hard decisions to be made. And, like when you couple yourself with another person and there are hard decisions to be made, things can get a little tense.
It isn't. I mean, I do think it does seem to me very possible that merely the sort of establishing that fact in this episode before it gets addressed and resolved, to really just kind of sort of set the table with that, right? This is in some ways actually to almost lean into that weirdness and disappointment. When they get back together and they're alone in the wilderness again, just like episode 3 or episode 4, except it's not the same, right? They're in a parallel situation, and yet, and if anything, it seems more natural, more culminating, right? Like they're reunited again, just like before, except now, like they've both suffered and struggled, and she's rescued him, and everything that she was trying to do ever since she was locked up in the tree, right? She's accomplished now, right? She got to him and she saved his life from the darkness, and look, everyone's been in the other thing that I really like about this is that I think it could work really interestingly for the theme as a whole, right? Escape from bondage, because there's reason to think. That's why, again, like with episode 7 being sort of, being climactic there in the middle of the season, right? This could look like the climax, right? Look, we just big old prison break at the end of episode 7, right? Not just Baren, but then accentuated with all of the living and dead prisoners all getting set free, right? I mean, it was like people released from bonds all over the place in episode 7. So that's it, right? That's the kind of thing we're talking about, right? And so to sort of realize, no, there are bonds that are still there. The problems are not solved. These are not the freedom from bondage that we were,
that you'd hoped for.
That you'd hoped for, that we were really building towards. So
because in a modern story, this probably would be, because they would just go off together and forget everybody else. Like
it certainly.
That's really
This, the shape of the plot to this point could totally be a Disney movie. Dark one, but like, right? I mean, like, to some extent, we'd have to have a reconciliation with the grumpy father, right? But so we'd have to work that in somehow. But you see what I mean, right? I mean, like, you've got the
Black
Elf Princess.
Cauldron. That's sure. Yeah, Black Cauldron is at least as dark.
Well, okay,
up until this point.
Right. Anyway, no, I'm just thinking, like, like the elf princess who, like, leaves home and, like, pursues and, like, rescues the prince, and
I mean, is it any less dark than Sleeping Beauty at this point?
Right. Sure.
Like, in Sleeping Beauty, there's some stuff that happens, and the threat is that everyone's going to die because it's going to be 100 years, and the prince gets locked up, and there's a dragon and all that.
Right.
So.
Yeah. No, I mean, I guess this is just a long-winded way of agreeing with what Nick was saying, that you could easily see a modern story which would end here. And to kind of help what I would love to see, our story do at this point is really push the reader, the viewer, to basically saying, okay, that seemed like a nice climactic escape, prison break. I thought this was the prison break season. I thought this was what we were building towards, right? If that's not the prison that we're escaping from, if those are not the chains that are supposed to, then what is exactly? Right.
Yeah. Like, because I can imagine, right? So we have mission focused Baren who's like, all right, I just got to get her someplace safe so I can do the thing that I'm supposed to be doing. Meanwhile, he's the one who gets tired. He's the one who has to stop every night, right? Like, he's the one slowing the thing down because he's going to just drop from exhaustion, and she's fresh as a daisy.
Not even to mention the whole, like, she just took down the dude who overcame him plus Finrod together, right?
Right.
So yes, like, yeah.
There's in a situation where he was not even a speed bump.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, it is a peculiar place for him to be like, well, but I still have work that I have to do, so but I want to keep you safe. You who are obviously and manifestly 1,000 times more competent than I and more capable of defending not only yourself but me, right? And yet I'm gonna like protect you here somehow. I mean, yeah, no, that's but again, the details of that's next episode, right? But again, to be opening the question up, of like, okay, so where is this relation? If this isn't the happily ever after, which it looks like it could be, which it feels at the end of last episode, it might seem like, happily ever after tainted by the sorrow of Finrod's death, right? But apart from that, everything looks fair for happily ever after. The bad guys are gone, and they're reunited, and yes, so to have, no, it's not happily ever after. No, the chains have not all been loosed, and no, like, their relationship isn't really where it's supposed to be. So anyway, that's
and it's not
that's fun.
The perfection
that
we kind of want it to be at this point.
Yep, agreed. Okay.
And we make no claims that this is a perfect relationship. Sure, it's the love story for the ages, but I mean, no real love story comes without conflict between the people involved.
Right. Yeah.
And
no, I like
episode 4, they didn't have to make any choices yet or do anything.
There's no stakes.
That's what's changed since then, is now they have to actually make some decisions, do some things.
And I'm skipping past the leap and the conflict with Celegorm and Curufin, because we'll get to that when we talk about the Fëanorians. But we are also leaving this episode with Baren apparently very grievously wounded, right? So there's going to be that sort of note of unresolvedness, of tension at the end of the episode too. Like, where are they going? How are they going anywhere? So that is to say, I like how the, ending this with Baren looking like there's a non-zero chance he might bleed out from his gut wound, seems like a good place to end this episode, with that sense of, and I know she's going to treat him and everything. It's not like he's going to get shot, keel over, and the credits are going to roll. But still, like, it's
there should be just a hint.
Yeah,
there should be just a hint of Philip Menzies' Gift of Men playing in the background.
Yes,
right.
Yes,
which is
roll the mortality theme. Yeah, exactly.
That's actually my favorite piece of the entire film collection is the Gift of Men.
Yeah,
it's so beautiful.
Yeah. Okay. All right, good. So that's where we are with Baren and Luthien, which again I think is kind of an important cue for the entire theme. Let's get back to Doriath. So Mablung shows up. In force. We got the super awkward reading of the letter by Gil-galad. The worst assignment ever, the worst first diplomatic assignment ever, right? For Gil-galad, and Thingol being furious, and we didn't get anything other than Thingol like storming out in a rage, right? Did we get
essentially
anything further resolution of that. So we got a vague sense of like, I will make them pay, right, from Thingol, and now we see the army showing up. So how much, when we have the army of Doriath showing up at the doors of Nargothrond, how much are we wanting to lean into the proto-kinslaying deal here? Like, how are we trying to make viewers think like battle is imminent here?
We are going to set the armies opposite each other.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see the people that you would potentially be fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is, they're closer than Fingolfin and the Fëanorian's camp were in back in season 3. Right. Season 3? Season 4? Season 4.
The camps was the beginning of season 4.
Of season 4. Yeah. So it's, like
it's tense.
The wrong person says the wrong thing, or somebody accidentally lets an arrow loose in the wrong direction.
I was thinking of the snake incident with King Arthur. Do you know? That guy at the end of the Mordred battle when they're signing a truce, but somebody gets bitten by a snake and he draws a sword to kill the snake, and they see him draw the sword, and that's the fight how the battle begins that leads to the death of Arthur and Mordred.
Gotcha.
I was thinking of the shot heard around the world at Lexington in Massachusetts, and like could have been anybody.
Intense
was
situations.
Just there a couple weeks ago,
takes
by the
one.
Very cool. At the green where the battle was. Okay. All right. So we are building that level of tension. Like Mablung and his army shows up, and it seems that violence is imminent.
Because it's an army that showed up.
But super possible. I think I don't know about imminent, but like
it's on the table when you don't say, hey, we have some questions about the diplomatic situation here, and mass all your tanks on the border. That's not the conversation that you're having.
Right. Now, there's an important question to be asked here, and I don't know if anyone is asking it. That is, anybody in the episode is asking it, but this is Thingol's army. This is Mr. kinslaying? Are you kidding? That's the worst thing anybody could ever do. How could you possibly slay your own kin, you monstrous Noldor freaks, right? And he's now marching his army on them, right? I mean, now, again, I'm not saying that my sympathy is not with Thingol in his reaction to the letter that he receives here, but surely that reaction's got to be on the table for somebody, right? Like, who's the Mr. High and Mighty, I would never slay my kin now?
Right. Well, who would say that though? Like, would Curufin or Celegorm say, because they don't have super legs to stand on there?
No, but I bet you they would mock him for it. I don't know that they'd be the ones to say it, because again, it's not like they. The
only person who could make that comment would be Maedhros after the fact at the very end, and I don't think he's going to, because he's so mad at Celegorm and Curufin. And that moment, the fact that Thingol's being an idiot, the fact that Thingol's being an idiot doesn't really make him feel any better.
No, and it would not be high on his priority list. No, I guess the number one person I'm thinking of is Mablung.
Who's like, why am I marching against elves?
Yeah, exactly. How uncomfortable is Mablung? I mean, on the one hand, surely he's got to be on board with the rescue Luthien. He's got to be personally outraged, But
Orodreth is the person I would put it in the mouth of, in an attempt to keep the peace. Essentially, when Mablung's you say that she's gone, but I have no reason to believe you, and Orodreth can say, look, your alternative is kinslaying.
Right. Yeah.
Don't you want to know for sure, at least,
before going that route? Yeah. So that's the thing, is that as tense as the situation is, nobody involved actually wants to start a war.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's a show of force.
It is.
Turn over Luthien or else.
Yeah. But it's it's a bigger deal than that, right? It's not just like we don't want to start a war. It's like we don't like, and no, any violence is a super big deal. Like one elf, killing one elf, even if it doesn't lead to war, right?
Would be
huge deal.
Exactly.
Huge,
International
especially
incident.
Under those circumstances when it's Thingol, for crying out loud, right? With the elves of Doriath themselves. So yeah, I almost feel like that it's something that has to be said at some point, and to show, yeah,
because the last time we had something comparable to this was the camp of Fingolfin demanding to know where Fingon was and laying it at the feet of the Fëanorians and being like, we need to talk about this. And they're like, but he's not here. And they're like, you would say that, wouldn't you?
Who would say that? Somebody who had Fingon.
Yeah.
Well, and not only that, but like somebody who like left us behind for dead and then burned the ships. That's who. So I mean, there was this whole history of beef there,
and that's
even apart from the Fingon situation.
I was going to say, and so that's what's absent here is this is not the camp of Fingolfin and the camp of Fëanor. This is Nargothrond and Doriath, who have been friends the whole time, but who's in charge of Nargothrond?
Yeah.
And Doriath has not been friends with the Fëanorians.
No.
They don't even have diplomatic relationships with them. And that's who wrote that letter. So this army is really there for Celegorm and Curufin. So if they're not going to turn over Luthien,
then they
there is
turn
an
over
alternative.
somebody.
Turn over somebody, we'll take them back to Doriath and they can face justice there. So it's not really we're threatening to kill everybody or start a war or any of that.
Right.
It's more of we demand answers and we insist that we get them. Like, we're not going to just sit here and wait for you to write back a letter.
Yeah. But no, I just...
And
I don't think Thingol gets a pass on the show of force.
No.
I just don't.
No.
But
at the same time, like, when you read the book, it's like, how could this not have happened? It had, how does Thingol let that stand?
Yeah.
Without doing something about it?
Well, there's always the question of how much time passes between events. So if the news from Tolsirian reaches Doriath almost immediately after that letter reaches Doriath, then no one had time to mobilize forces.
Right.
We're just giving them enough time to create a dramatic situation.
Sure. Yeah. No, I like it. But it is, I mean, yes. When you are in the political party that defines itself as against kinslaying, to march your army into the field, howsoever good your reasons, right? That's it's a big deal.
You're saying we are willing to slay some kin.
Yes, exactly. We're willing to slay some kin, and that's again it doesn't matter. And again, I do not question we need to rescue Luthien. Totally on board, but there is inherent and inescapable hypocrisy involved in the sending of force.
I'm okay with Thingol being hypocritical.
Yeah, me too. I think it's good. I just I want to make sure
you want someone to call him
on
his hypocrisy.
I think it needs to be it's like it's a little, it's not exactly an elephant in the room, but it's kind of I want to make sure that
someone says that.
Yeah, viewers would know that we're well aware of the tension and the irony there, and that Thingol is, and because also it kind of points to where Thingol is in his own trajectory, right? I mean, he is pretty close to his nadir right here, right? I mean, his nadir really is when he sends Baren away, that's his lowest point, but he's still pretty close to the bottom of the well, right? And so to point out that here in this moment, when you, Thingol, are under the greatest pressure that you're gonna, when you've reached your bottommost point, and push came to shove, you marched an army in the field against your kin, right? I think it's just worth pointing out, I think. But okay, Now, so tell me more about the, because I don't even think I said earlier in the session that we don't have a full script for this episode. We just have an outline. So there are some of the elements that I'm still a little bit shakier on and need a little bit more explanation of. Tell me more about how the conversation goes. So because Orodreth pitches in, right? Mablung comes and talks to Celegorm and Curufin, right? Do a little summary for me of how the communications go. So Mablung shows up with his, we're willing to slay our kin if you push me army, right? And who comes out to meet with him? Just Celegorm and Curufin, or does Orodreth come too?
I think we had all of them in that conversation.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Because part of the storyline here is that Orodreth is technically king of Nargothrond.
Right. They haven't officially usurped Nargothrond.
And Celegorm and Curufin are very clearly calling a lot of shots.
Right.
So they're not going to let Orodreth meet with Mablung without them, because they're really involved in what happens here.
Yeah, sure.
And they can't meet with Mablung without him, because then it looks like they've done something without the king's permission. So I think everyone's in the conversation.
Right. And Orodreth, it's important to realize that Orodreth also realizes that he finally has the piece of political capital he needs to get rid of them. They finally took it too far. Because Mablung, because Orodreth's first concern is, you want the king's daughter, where's my son, who I sent to you, right? And when Mablung tells Orodreth the contents of the letter, he turns up to Curufin and is like, you did what?
Right.
How many
Fingal probably wouldn't shoot the messenger, but you made my son the messenger of that message, right? Yeah.
How many stupid pills does it take?
Right.
But it also reveals that Orodreth didn't know.
Right.
And that shows that Celegorm and Curufin have been acting on their own, which the audience knows, but the people of Nargothrond maybe hadn't known to this point.
Okay.
But now Celegorm and Curufin have taken actions that led to really angering Doriath, not a direction that Nargothrond had wanted to go in.
Right. So it is really clear to Orodreth, and therefore the people of Nargothrond, that Celegorm and Celegorm and Curufin have single-handedly almost precipitated war with Doriath.
Right.
So is this then we're envisioning the kind of the beginning of the schism, the distancing, the lack of the loss of sympathy with Celegorm and Curufin? So
this is the tip of the wedge. The rest of it hits home when the prisoners return from Tolungarhath.
Yeah.
Right. And we find out that Finrod's dead, for example. Right. And that Luthien made it to Tolsirian and saved every freaking body.
Right.
Except Finrod.
Except Finrod. Yeah. And
Finrod's guys.
And Finrod's guys. So
except for everybody that we met.
Right.
Yes.
She saved all the dead people.
Yes.
So there's that. And them, the prisoners who arrive.
Right. She did save somebody.
And so
that is a significant piece of information that is going to shift public opinion.
Right. So
now, tell me more about how that shifts that's going to shift public opinion against Celegorm and Curufin, or just like generally pro?
Because essentially they engineered a situation that sent him to his death.
Okay.
And made moves on Thingol's daughter in a way that nearly precipitated a war. This finally gives the proof that Mablung needs to not not demand her from Orodreth, not continue to demand that Orodreth produce her. Now he's got someplace else to go.
So this convinces him. Is it a question of convincing him that Orodreth was telling the truth? Or is it just like now he has something else to do or something?
He has another direction to go. Right now, Orodreth is his only lead.
Right, exactly. That's what I was just going to say.
Mablung's directions are find Luthien and bring her home.
Right.
So Orodreth's like,
being
hey, she's not here.
Right, yeah.
Right. And maybe Orodreth's telling the truth and he doesn't know where Luthien is, but that doesn't mean that those Fëanorians don't have something to do with it.
And that doesn't even mean, I mean, I could imagine Mablung thinking, well, look, if you didn't even know about this letter, how do I know they're not keeping her in a closet somewhere in Nargothrond?
Right.
Like, how do I know for sure that she isn't there and you don't know that she's there?
Yeah. Maybe she's in a closet with Gil-galad.
No, Gil-galad's in Doriath.
Different closet entirely.
Different time, different closet.
Yeah, different time, different closet, different age. Yeah. Anyway.
Luthien's actually Sauron.
Stop it. Just stop it. Okay.
So the point being, Orodreth not knowing stuff makes him look dumb and therefore unreliable when he says, no, Luthien's gone. She's not here.
Or at least, if he doesn't know stuff, then why should
what
you
else
believe...
does he? What else doesn't he know?
What else doesn't he know? Exactly. Yeah.
So
no, that makes sense.
This outside confirmation that Luthien did in fact go somewhere else allows them to move, and it breaks the stalemate. But the reason the people of Nargothrond are upset is that, yes, they chose Celegorm's speech over Finrod's speech and didn't go along with Finrod's, gotta fulfill my oath to this random mortal dude because that's how oaths work.
Right.
They're like, whatever, go do your thing. But that doesn't mean they wanted Finrod to go away and die.
Right.
Like
and there's some of their own personal guilt at work here too.
Right.
Yeah. Like they're recognizing a mistake to toss out the guy who built Nargothrond. Well, not built Nargothrond.
And not exactly toss out, but exactly. I mean, and I will say this is one of the things that, of those steps that I was alluding to at the beginning of the episode, this is the one in the text that I always found least convincing. Like, what exactly are they blaming Celegorm and Curufin for? Not that they're not blameworthy in some ways, but like, why is it, Nick? I'd always been thinking along the lines that used to like look in the mirror, folks. If you're upset about Thingol going off to his death, like,
and Curufin should say something to this effect, like you're gonna blame this on us. You chose this,
right?
This
chose,
all of you. Yeah, all of you were in this.
Right. Yeah. Right.
But when you're mad, it's easier to blame other people.
And the more somebody gets defensive like that, the less inclined. Like they're all just going to stand there silently.
Yeah.
While Orodreth kicks them out.
Right. Yes. So in this way,
the other thing we've done is the whole thing the Fëanorians were up to in Nargothrond was all focused on, well, if we took Tolsirian back, or, well, if we did this, like they had all these plans of how they were going to solidify power and eventually be able to attack Angband, I suppose. But apparently none of those plans were ready to do anything to help Finrod. And yet Luthien could go and take the whole tower down by herself. So by having that happen, it shows them up as being all talk.
Yeah, it makes
even if
everything
that's not
they said
fair,
look really empty. Yes.
But it had that effect. So that's part of the loss of political capital as well, is that they've been talking a whole big plan and all these intentions that amounted to nothing.
Yeah, the whole Mablung's army thing, I think, is a very clever adaptation choice in this episode, because that really presents, that's a smoking gun. Like, that is a very bad thing that they have done. That is a kick out of Nargothrond worthy offense that they have committed, right? But then, especially as you say, then when you supplement it with those other things, right?
Yes.
And we liked this whole "let's take Tolsirian back and make Nargothrond great again" speech that you were making,
Right.
but like now,
But then you rioted against the capital, and
right. Yeah, it's you know, so yeah, so you can see how it would look just not it would look kind of pointless now, right? It would all like basically that they'd be seeing through it. They'd be like, yeah, that was a good speech, but at the end of the day, like, what have they, you know, what have they accomplished? What can they accomplish? What, you know, anyway, but that's not enough for them to be like, we're kicking you to the curb completely necessarily. At least it wouldn't be as convincing, right? But in the context of the Mablung thing, now it's much more, right? And then even the scapegoating, essentially, like their own guilt onto Celegorm and Curufin for letting Finrod go unassisted to his death, also by itself would still not feel like a satisfying. Again, there's no like smoking gun. You have done something capital W wrong that you should be kicked out for. But Mablung showing up really does accomplish that, and therefore, I think really effectively supplement all those other situations.
And I think another benefit of the way this is set up is like Orodreth gets a really bad rap from a lot of people's readings of the Silmarillion, but the way that this sets things up is that he has been waiting for his moment. He knew he didn't have the clout to knock them out in political combat, as it were, under the circumstances that already existed. You know, after the people were willing to kick Finrod out, like that, like all bets are off at that point. Yes. But he finally has his moment, and he steps up and says, "Okay, that's it. You're out."
That's it. Yeah.
Knowing that with Finrod dead, the people are going to be so kind of like, what have we done? Yes. That they're not going to defend Celegorm and Curufin at this point. Yes. Period.
Yes. Now I like that a lot. Making this moment into a moment of real strength for Orodreth is, as you say, going to be something that's going to be nicely corrective of a lot of people's readings of the Silmarillion, where Orodreth comes across as weak. In part, Orodreth's apparent weakness in the published Silmarillion is a little bit of an accident of literary history in some ways.
Right.
Like, Orodreth's character kind of got shoehorned by Tolkien into a bunch of roles that, it's just like, I don't think Tolkien sat down and was like,
Orodreth is a weak person.
Yeah, I'm going to make Orodreth a wimp, right? Yeah. Like that's,
Think about how you were handling the final moments of Norn. You know, no one set out saying that Norn, our first proto-dwarf character, is going to turn out to be a horrible person who has all these latent bigoted ideas.
Yeah.
But, someone's got to kick the petty dwarves out of the caves of the River Narog, and it doesn't look good if it's Finrod, and it can't be Thingol. But Norn's there, so it's him.
Right.
Well, and it turned out that it was preferable to have it be somebody that we already liked. Because it makes the tragedy of that kind of thinking more impactful.
It is. And I'm not saying it didn't work. It is an example, though, of getting written into situations of, I need a character to do this. Hey, Orodreth, can you just hold the crown of Nargothrond for a bit?
But it's important to keep in mind, what was he supposed to... If Finrod couldn't talk the people out of going along with Celegorm and Curufin's thinking, what was Orodreth supposed to do?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, if I could take a few steps back for a second, this is part of the fun of adaptation, right? Is to be able to get this opportunity to think through some of these characters. I mean, another element of Orodreth's character in the Silmarillion is that he's also kind of a, like, always a bridesmaid sort of character. Like, he is on the one hand in a position of authority, but the stories are never about him, right? You know, like he's a supporting. He plays a supporting role in Turin's story. He plays a supporting role, you know, in this story. He's never the focal point. He never even has a moment where he's like the hero, right? He's just always like part of the furniture in Nargothrond, essentially, and ends up acting like furniture, you know, for quite a bit of the time. So again, it's totally natural, like, that it should happen. And as you say, Maria, it's a good example of, you know, you sometimes a story will corner you into a place and you know, where you end up making a choice, right? And there were a few choices that led to Orodreth, to the apparent weakness of Orodreth's character. But anyway, that is to say, I think it's really fun to take this, and I love that idea. I love to say, like, and now Orodreth, who was not weak at any point, though he was in a weak position compared to that of Celegorm and Curufin, right? He knew himself to be in a tenuous position there.
Right.
But
he was not necessarily weak, but his position was weak, and he was canny enough to realize that.
And he bided his time, and now he's making his move, and he will be, I mean, should be, I think, a really defining moment, right? In fact, we might want to be particularly thoughtful about this. The moment when he steps up and basically kicks Celegorm and Curufin out is, of course, the moment he's going to become King of Nargothrond.
Right. Yes.
Not only the sort of like quasi-officially, but in reality, right? We might want to be thinking about how we set up the Turin story here. You know, like there are going to be corresponding moments in the Turin story, which is, of course, the end of Orodreth's trajectory. And we might want to be thinking about how we might want to be setting up some particular important moments in Orodreth's later.
I'm going to miss scenes with Orodreth's family at the breakfast nook.
Yes.
Well, that's one direction we went with Orodreth in Silmfilm, is to focus a little bit more on the family and domestic side with him, rather than the mover and shaker of armies. He's not into that. He's not that guy. And hopefully that gives him some stability moving forward, of like, that's what he's been focused on, and that he can continue to focus on that. And
well, and it's one of our few elven families that we see all together. Like, we don't get that.
Yeah, there's a lot of missing moms.
There's a lot of missing moms, but there's no families sitting at a table having a conversation.
Not to mention the fact that in that way, his family is particularly important anyway, in that his is the family we see building from scratch. Like, he's the only one of these elf lords whom we saw, like, meeting his wife and getting married, right, at the Maerth Adurthad, and then, like, having kids, and now we're seeing his kids grow up and become elf lords themselves. Like, we, you know, we kind of started in Medius Rest with a bunch of the rest of the elf lords as far as their family situations and children are concerned. Orodreth, we've, like, watched grow up in front of our eyes, right, and we've seen him become, in his early friendship with Celebrimbor, and you know, we've had a bunch of these sort of like coming of age moments. But again, I'm thinking in particular, like, we made his wedding at the Maerth Adurthad a turning point, right, in the, you know, the elves there in Beleriand.
Right.
So
the meeting of Sindar and Noldor was told in his family story, and
exactly,
when you're saying he's the only one we've like followed the whole way through in Beleriand.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's what's his story, is the story of Beleriand.
and Noldor Sindar in Beleriand. Yeah, exactly.
And most of the rest of them either had their families back in Valinor, but nothing has changed since then,
Right.
or they've lost some people.
Right, exactly. I mean,
but
other
very
people's
few people-
families are important, like Turgon, of course. That,
Sure.
as you were just alluding to. But no, his like this kind of. I mean, who else have we seen like get married, have kids, like and all of that has been a part of the Aerith. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
That went so great for her.
Sure. Yes. Yeah.
Finway.
Well, there's the counterexample that proves the rules. So, yeah. Sure. But yeah. Anyway, the point is, like, again, this is why I really like the spotlight, like having him be really focused on his family, in particular, since we brought Gil-galad back into his family tree, and so therefore his family is of long-term significance as well.
Yeah.
And so having all of the Orodreth story and the Orodreth family story looming behind, our Gil-galad figure when we really get to him is going to be important.
And we have set up Gil-galad who admires Fingolfin, and then and also admires Finrod, but also has the advice and like canny shrewdness inserted into him by his father, right? And I feel like that kind of those elements together, he's kind of going to be all of those things.
Yeah.
When we get him in the Second Age, he's going to be the philosopher, warrior, king, politician.
Right.
Not a hothead like his grandfather.
Which is why he is the longest running High King of the Noldor.
That's it. The most successful High King ever. No question.
Line of kings.
Okay, awesome. We've strayed into talking about the Fëanorians a bit, which is cool, but that's fine. We're going to talk about them anyway. But let me go back to Mablung for a second, because I don't want to skip over
where his story lands.
Well, yeah. I mean, like having already taken a step or two out in bringing Mablung with an army to Nargothrond, rather than just thinking about it, right? I mean, as you guys explained in the text, it seems that the army doesn't get there, right? Thingol's going there, but that doesn't happen. So we made it happen, and I love it. As I said, I think that's a wonderful thing. You guys then went several steps further, and now we're doing more, right? So tell me, where's this headed? What's going on there?
Well, so Mablung is following Luthien.
Right.
He did, like, his mission's not
job.
over.
His remit is come home with Luthien. Yeah.
Right. Like he's gonna to now turn around and go home? Like,
Right.
oh, Luthien knocked down the Tower of Tolsirion. Okay, all right, well that's fine. No.
I'll go tell Thingol that rumors are she was a little bit north of where I was, but I came home to tell you that instead of chasing after her. I hear you.
Right.
I hear you. Yeah. That would be a tough sell.
So he marches north. We
Yeah.
get an opportunity to allow him and his guys to give us some commentary on the impact, because they've been up this way before, but it's never looked like this.
Yeah.
You know, the land is getting corrupted.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask about that. So there were the two things. The two things that you guys emphasized were their perception, the perception of the Doriath elves of the corruption of the land, and then of the reclamation of Tolsirion when they arrived there.
Yes.
So,
which that's barely a scene in my opinion. Mostly we're just seeing them kind of doing the cleanup. Now they're there to kind of set up a base of operations so that they can go out and hunt for the missing princess, obviously.
Right.
But to see good that is being done by the story of Baren and Luthien. This story has impact. It brings hope. It pushes away the darkness. It cleanses the corruption. Even though Baren and Luthien are maybe a little at odds with each other, it's still good to have been. The things are still good to have been.
Right. Yeah. Right. Okay. What is the projected long-term impact of their perception of the corruption of the land? Is this starting like an anti-isolationism thread in
At least from
Doriath?
Mablung.
Yeah.
So there's a few things we were hoping to do to that. Is one, we're gonna need to explain why Mablung and Beleg have different viewpoints than the rest of Doriath later on.
Right.
Like, so we had to show Mablung's reaction to this.
Okay.
So that there's some basis for it later.
I personally don't. I'm personally going to kind of push for Mablung and Beleg to bring at least some people with them, rather than show up all on their lonesome, as if that's going to do it.
Right.
Anything significant. And maybe it's these guys who also saw the corruption taking place.
Right.
The other direction this is going is this is the episode where Glaurung leaves Keep Helivorn and is going to be stationed in Dorthonion. So for them to mention the waterways, we're connecting that to what's happening here and giving a hint of what's to come. Obviously, we're not expecting the audience to put that all together yet because they haven't seen it yet. But that's why there's a comment about the water and Ulmo and all of
I was guessing that.
Can the land recover from this? Is this going to get washed away? That's the direction it's headed in.
A logical thing when it's Tolsirian right there in the middle of the river that has been corrupted, and that all makes a lot of sense. And just to make sure, I want to make sure everybody is following at home. We've been referring to Beleg and Mablung showing up at the Near Ninth Arnoidiad is what we've been alluding. I just want to make sure that that's explicitly clear. The thing that we have in mind next season.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
I was like, did we not say that?
No, we didn't say that explicitly. It just occurred to me we didn't say that explicitly. So, Anyway, so so thinking ahead towards that, I agree, is important. Okay. All right. Good. Well, then let's. I have questions about, given Luthien's trajectory, how is Mablung getting home? But I'm not going to ask that because that's not an episode 8 question.
That is in fact a later.
I figured.
So now we can say that Mablung and his guys will all still be around this area in episode 9.
Yeah. Yes. Can I say I also kind of don't hate the fact that Mablung is the guy who always gets sent out on like quests to save or accompany women, and it never pans out for him, right? Like, don't have Mablung either escorting or searching for your women folk because his closing percentage is really low there, I want to say.
You definitely want Beleg out.
Beleg is a better bet. Yeah, Beleg is a better bet.
Until you get to Turin's story, in which case neither of them is going to do you any good.
Well, but for different reasons, right?
Yes,
it's
very different
poor
reasons,
Mablung is what I'm saying. But anyway, but later on, poor Mablung. Okay, so back to the Fëanorians. Let's focus on what. So I love the discussion we already had about their ouster from Nargothrond. That works really well. Tell me more about their own plan and mindset. I guess one of the things that needs to be sort of explained here, and we've talked about this a little bit, but in the context of the proposal letter being the sort of smoking gun that gives Orodreth the evidence that he needs and whatever. Why does Curufin think this is a good idea again? The letter? In the first place.
Well,
Like,
we had to
how
first
does this fit
answer
into their plan exactly?
we had to first answer the question, why do they go this way in the first place? It's nowhere near any of the places they need to go.
Right.
So what I think he's hoping for is to at least salvage something of the situation, because now he's got to go back to Maithros without having
Right. Oh no,
secured
I was thinking.
Syrian.
I'm still back a step. I'm still thinking about the letter that they sent.
Oh,
Right.
The proposal
So,
letter.
right. So the idea there was that Celegorm was obviously very taken by Luthien,
Sure.
as most people are.
Sure.
Um,
And Celegorm
and-
writing an ill thought out proposal
Yeah.
and arrogant proposal letter seems on brand.
but
Right.
what Curufin's thinking is that Thingol named a Silmaril. That's their business. This makes sense. And this would be a chance to have a union between the House of Fëanor and Doriath, a chance that has never been on the table before. So if he can pull this
So-
off,
Right.
if you're
So the
going to be
idea is that
going
the
out
naming
there,
of the Silmaril has given him like leverage of some kind.
well,
in
here's the
itself.
thing.
permission.
If
Right.
you're going to be going out there naming the Cimmeril as the bride price for your daughter, maybe talk to the people to whom they rightfully own.
Right. Right. Belong.
To
Yeah.
whom they, yeah, that word.
Yeah. Exactly. Yep. Yep. Yes. Right.
So
So
that's
if you
his-
wanted a
his
Silmaril
logic.
in exchange for Luthien, you should have been talking to us anyway. So I'm gonna just go ahead and broach this topic since you've broached it already.
Exactly.
Right.
Then she
Right.
brought this up.
Yeah.
May I offer my brother Celegorm, perfectly eligible bachelor,
Right.
kind of
And
thing.
much more valuable to you as a son-in-law than
For sure.
that guy.
Right.
And easy
so,
to think how that could be a mistake that even Curufin could make
Right.
in thinking that that argument might hold some weight. You have to be a certain level of delusional to think that
Yes.
Thingol under any circumstance is going to be like, well, yes, that Fëanorian chap really would, be a great son-in-law. Like, I mean, you have to be at least a little bit delusional to think that
Yeah.
Thingol is going to think that under any circumstances, right?
Of course.
But-
Of
Also,
course.
I think
And-
that Curufin thinks that he's subtle enough to not in any way suggest that they're holding Luthien against her will. Which, at the point that he writes the letter, they're not.
They're
right?
not. Right.
Thingol just immediately jumps to that conclusion because why on earth
Like,
else
the
would
only circumstance
Luthien
under
stay
which
there?
this, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they made some mistakes there. And this is not Curufin's most brilliant plan ever.
Right.
But
so
part of it is because he's never met Thingol. He's never been to Doriath. He doesn't have a good handle on the situation, and he misreads it spectacularly.
Yeah, they're thinking of the Sindar. These people are kind of backward. They are living in trees, and I heard something about a cave, right? They call it the 1,000 caves, but that's obviously just hyperbole.
Right. Right.
So, like, we're offering them something useful here.
Right. All the Fëanorians know about Doriath is what the dwarves have told them, because the dwarves trade with both.
Right.
Mhm.
So they've heard stuff very secondhand, and they've formed some maybe not great opinions. But
Mhm.
Right. And the dwarves don't have a super high opinion of the Sindarin civilization.
Right.
Also,
that's my point.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
if the Fëanorians are going to be proud, which they are, and they're getting information from dwarves who are also proud,
Which is not helping them. Yes. Yeah.
then
yeah.
there's going to be
Not
some
helping their
misjudgment
understanding.
going on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's my thought as to how Curufin makes that serious of a mistake.
So in a sense, it's not that he exactly or sort of exclusively fails in cunning, but rather that he's sort of really limited in information, right? He does, as you say, he doesn't have the experience of the data to read this particular room correctly.
he thinks he's bullying the natives
Right.
when he's actually poking a bear.
Right. Right.
And
Yes.
the overall why are Celegorm and Curufin in West Beleriand in the first place, they were supposed to be accomplishing things while they were over here. One of them was make sure Tolsirian doesn't fall to the enemy,
Right.
and they failed at that before they even got there. And then, hey, we saved people and brought them back to Nargothrond, so now we've got the spot in Nargothrond, so like we're moving up in the world, and from here we can retake Tolsirian. We could expand things, but Curufin's end goal has always been, hey, the High Kingship. Because we ceded it to Fingolfin. I wasn't on board with that, but it happened. No one asked Curufin whether or not Fingon got to be High King next.
Yeah.
So as far as he's concerned, it's still kind of an open question.
Well,
And
when
if
they
they could
get
establish-
to Nargothrond, they don't know. As far as they can, there is no High King. Well, actually, no. As far as they know, Fingolfin's still High King. They don't know for certain he's dead.
No, I mean
I think that Mithros suspects it. He has like a sense of it, but
it's a little bit more than suspect. Like, and at this point, years have gone by. So,
well, they had no communication.
At the very beginning of this,
at the very beginning, yeah, but still, I mean, but yeah, I mean, as I recall, we were imagining that Curufin's plan A for coming over here with his and his brother's army was essentially to establish a strong Fëanorian presence in Western Beleriand, which there wasn't, right?
Yes.
And for which there's plenty of empty space, right?
At this time,
And of course, what better thing to do? And of course, even as the narrator points out of Beleriand and its realms, Finrod's domain is the biggest of any of them, right? So if they could have carved out a little chunk of that would have been nice. Taking over in Nargothrond is much better, right? Now they're and thinking about like leverage towards High Kingship, and especially if he controls Tolsirian and regains. Anyway, yeah. Okay, so this was Plan A. That's all falling apart now. They significantly misread the room and overplayed their hand with Thingol, and now they're on the out. So the two questions: why do they go north in the first place? And I remember we talked about this way back when we were originally going through the.
Well, we gave
outline.
ourselves in saying that part of their mission statement was to make contact with Fingon.
Okay.
That gave us the ability to give them something to do, which had pointed them in the direction that they're supposed to be going.
Are they alone? Have they lost their army?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because Celebrimbor stayed behind, and their army was just like, yeah, we're not getting kicked out.
Okay. So basically, are we making Celebrimbor the leader of the new? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Marie, go ahead.
Sorry. No, because Celebrimbor is good friends with Orodreth. So this will be a much better partnership than Orodreth trying to work around Celegorm and Curufin.
Right.
But all they've got with them is 2 horses and Huan.
Right. Okay.
That's it.
Okay, so they are
and
out
at least
on
one
their own.
bow and one knife.
Well, okay, yeah, they're weapons, but
they have
my
supplies,
point is
but
they don't have any other guys. It's because the whole Leap of Beren situation, you can't have other witnesses for that to have played out the way it did.
Yeah.
So there, for everything else, we can always be like, oh, so and so is traveling, but there's like a whole entourage that just didn't get mentioned. That's one situation where there was not an entourage.
Agreed.
At least in my reading. So yeah, we send them north to make contact with Fingon. This is a recapitulation of the Aradel is leaving Gondolin so that she can speak with her father, Fingolfin, and get plans set in motion. And then she goes nowhere near Fingolfin and never meets with him.
Right.
In the whole entire time she's gone from Gondolin. Same thing here. They were Oh yeah, we'll definitely make contact with Fingon when they first arrive
Right,
in West
right.
Beleriand. They go through their whole plan. And then they're like, okay, well, after we recapture Solsirian, then we'll reestablish connection with Fingon from a
from a
position of
position of
strength.
strength.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
And then once they're taking over Solsirian, they're like, oh, great. Sorry, once they take Nargothrond, it's like, okay, cool. We're building up to that. This is going well.
Yeah.
And then it does not go well. So they're like, well, let's just salvage what we have and go see Fingon anyway. We can at least get news from him and see what the situation is before we report back to Mybros.
Mhm.
So they head north to go see Fingon.
Right.
Well,
And
Curufin
you guys were
heads
suggesting
north
in
to
the
go
outline.
see Fingon. I think that what we had was that Curufin intended to go see Fingon. I think that Celegorm had other ideas, if I recall. That Celegorm got Huon to track down Baren and Luthien, so they didn't accidentally.
Right. Yeah. So I think yeah. So again, with the not everyone's on the same page in all this. Curufin's idea was let's go talk to Fingon, and Celegorm's like, which way is Fingon? Yeah, let's go do that.
Right.
By the way, Huon, find her.
Yeah.
Which I love because, of course, Huon will make the wrong but understandable and friendly assumption about why Celegorm is saying find her. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
She's needs help.
She needs help, clearly.
Yeah.
And if Huon still thinks highly enough of Celegorm to return to him, Huon, will like to see that Celegorm would seem to be doing the right thing, which is going to help Baren and Luthien, who are now alone in the wilderness and may need help.
Yeah.
Right.
And Huon can't hear the soundtrack, so he won't hear the ominous sting that follows that.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Right. Yeah.
But,
yeah.
but the idea there being that Huon chose to go back to them.
Mhm.
Huon chose to leave Nargothrond with them when nobody else did. Like Celebrimbor was like, peace out, see you, you're not my dad anymore.
Yeah.
And Huon's like, okay, I'll go with Celegorm, like I always do. So like, even if there's reluctance in that moment, he's still very much the loyal dog companion.
There's got to be a bitterly ironic line, right, where Celegorm says something to the effect of like,
Well, at least
you haven't abandoned me.
Right, exactly.
At least I can still count on your loyalty, right? That that means everything to me. Yeah.
And then go find Luthien. Yeah.
But
it's so they're both headed in that way for similar but different reasons.
Is Celegorm deceiving Curufin? Does Curufin not even know that they're hunting down that like they're
they
on
just
the
don't
trail
talk about it.
Okay.
And if Curufin doesn't bother to think this through, then that's kind
as
of
long as they're
them.
heading north, why should he care? So when when they come across Baren and Luthien, then Curufin is genuinely like, well, son of a gun, there's Baren and Luthien. Like, who'da thunk? Like, that's, I mean, is he surprised? Does he then see that like Celegorm was doing this on purpose all along, or does like I'm just trying to make sure, like, is that dynamic because of course now we are coming to the last thing that I'm trying to sort out, right? Which is the mentality of Celegorm and Curufin when they're attacking Baren and Luthien.
Right.
And if the two of them are not on the same page, then it makes it even more complicated to try to understand.
Right.
So, why don't we do it this way? Let's walk me through the scene, the Baron's Leap scene, the conflict with Baren and Luthien scene, from Celegorm's point of view, and then from Curufin's point of view separately. So Celegorm has said to Huon, find them, and Huon believes they're going to help them, and so Huon leads them straight to Baren and Luthien, at which point Celegorm thinks and does what?
He's very happy to see Luthien again because he's genuinely interested in her. Like, there's that level. I'm not saying that he's a good guy about it or anything, but
sure. But is he upset with her? Does he feel jilted? Is he resentful?
That's the thing, is I'm trying to figure out if he has turned into the
if I can't have her, nobody can.
Or not even that, the hey, you're pretty. Hey, you're pretty. You know what? You're probably really ugly.
Right. Right.
Kind of mentality.
Gotcha.
You didn't
Gotcha.
pay attention to me, so you're now terrible. I don't
Right.
think that's Celegorm,
No.
Right.
but I don't know if there's any hint of that.
Besides which, I mean, it's hard to convince yourself of that when Luthien's right in front of you, right? So, but yeah.
I wish that I didn't have an example like that of someone doing. Sorry.
I forget. I forget you teach high school.
No. These
Yeah.
were adults even, but now a friend of mine
Yeah.
was on a train and some idiot guy was trying to catcall her, and when she, sensibly walked away from him,
Right.
he yelled after her, "You're probably actually fat," or something like that. And she was wearing a sundress, so she looked at herself and was like, "Huh," and kept going. 'Cause it's like,
You're
yeah,
probably
the size
actually fat.
Yeah, under the
Wow.
size 2 sundress, you can't tell, but
Right.
she's actually fat. And if
Right.
so, she should feel bad about it for sure.
Right. For sure.
Anyway, so I don't
Right.
know if Celegorm is a train heckler, but
Right.
he could be.
Right. Okay.
No, I think it's kind of more of the kind of, I did everything I was supposed to do. I was nice to you.
She's supposed to reciprocate me.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
There's no reason not to love me back.
Yeah.
So when he says to Huan, "Find her," what is in his head, as far as she's concerned, is I'm gonna go after her, and when I find her, then we're
when
gonna.
she sees me and him next to each other,
Yeah, exactly. So so she's gonna. So it's not even like I'm gonna win her back or I'm gonna convince her or something. It's like, I'm going to catch up with him, and then, obviously, things are going to work out like they probably would have worked out. I mean, he's probably rationalized her departure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Presumably.
Yeah. So
With his dog. Golly, that's going to be hard to rationalize, but...
the dog came back, but...
Dog came back, I know, but,
Yeah. She stole his dog.
She stole his dog and left.
yeah.
Man.
I know. You're someone who has a dog, so this feels very personal.
Well, it's my
The point
relationship
being-
with my dog is not exactly like Celegorm and Huan's, but
Fair.
yeah.
So the idea is that he thinks she's going to be happy to see him.
Okay,
And
so
instead,
he genuinely believes she's gonna be happy to see me when I find her.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's his thing. His whole deal is it's all going to be fine once
all gonna be
we're in
fine.
the same room again.
Yeah.
And instead, she's like, "What are you doing here? What a surprise!
Right.
What's this?"
And Curufin, who is just he's kind of done with this whole situation, starts
He's like-
mocking her.
Right.
So Celegorm, and when she barks back at him, Celegorm all of a sudden starts to put it together. It's like, oh, well, if I get rid of Baren,
So
he's the problem.
Right.
I need to get rid of him.
Except that's not the person who does that.
Well, no. Celegorm does do that. Curufin uses the opportunity to grab Luthien. Celegorm in the book, charges Baren, and now in the book we've done something a little different. In the book, they come upon them unawares and just swoop out of the woods.
Yeah.
We've created this entire conversation where Curufin is mocking Luthien for hanging out with her mortal dude.
Got it. Okay, so Celegorm shows up, believing Luthien everything's gonna be fine once they're there together. Luthien shows by her words and actions that she's actually not okay. Of course, his brother is not being nice to Luthien from the start,
right? And he wishes that he would kind of you're You're killing my chances here. You are the worst wingman ever, Curufin.
Right, yeah. Worst wingman ever. Exactly.
Huon, on the other hand, is best.
Right. Exactly.
Huon has been a fantastic wingman this entire time.
Yes. Here's Celegorm spoiled for choices. Okay, so he charges Baren, thinking that if I can just get rid of, I don't know what it is.
He goes into a rage. He just boils over.
Right. And if I can he deserves killing. If I can kill him anyway, then probably he's still sufficiently delusional to think that once he kills Baren, things will pan out with Luthien.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah, that'll happen.
Okay, all right. So he charges Baren. Meanwhile,
and he may not even be intending to actually harm him. It might be to cow him,
to scare him off.
Again, a demonstration.
Humiliate him.
Right, a demonstration that he is so much better than this other guy. So there's a little bit of posturing in this.
Right. Yeah. It's like an intensified version of if she sees us both in the room together, it's obvious who's the better catch. Okay, gotcha. Right. All right. So he's charging
at Baren. Him in the hallway and knock him down and
Right. I'm going to give him a wedgie.
He's going to look
so
shut
him in his
pathetic.
locker.
There's no way that she's going to. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Got it. Okay. So he's charging at Baren with malicious but not necessarily deadly lethal intent. Okay.
Right.
He doesn't have a drawn weapon, maybe.
Right. Meanwhile, he could come at it with barehanded or whatever. Okay.
Sorry.
Then Curufin snatches Luthien.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then he swoops in and hauls Luthien across his saddle bow, right? Mm-hmm. Onto the horse. Now,
which,
again,
given what we just saw, seems like the dumbest thing ever.
Right. Hang on, but we're still Celegorm. That's a later explanation, right?
Yeah.
We're still Celegorm. I'm doing my macho strut in the direction of Baren, and then I look over, and now my brother has hauled Luthien onto his saddle. Now what am I thinking?
I guess we're doing this now.
Oh, okay. So
time
abduction first, conversation second, right? It's time to go is what he's thinking.
Right.
Okay. Right. Well, that's one way to handle this situation.
Baren could leap directly out from in front of him to Curufin, because presumably these people are not that far apart.
Right. There are some limitations, howsoever famous the Leap of Beren may be. Yes.
Yeah. It's really hard for me to believe that this event, which was witnessed by almost no one, was but this is the best jump ever, you guys.
I know.
Nobody saw it.
It's one of the strangest little things. It's low key one of the weirdest elements of the Baren and Luthien story is the reference to the fact that somehow that one particular athletic accomplishment in the middle of this, as you say, largely unwitnessed event became somehow independently famous. Yeah.
Well, because I think it, as described, I think Tolkien was imagining Baren leaping after a horse that was riding away from him at full gallop, having come in on them unawares, as he describes it. They had a full head, they're coming in full tilt, full gallop.
Yeah.
And he outpaces the horse in this leap. And that would be
It would be something.
Insane.
It would be something. But
feat.
again, in a sense, it would be an even more remarkable accomplishment if it somehow became. Who ever heard of it and how? But anyway, yeah.
And if we want to make it like a really, really intense thing, if he actually knocks the horse down in the process of this, right? That's going to give that sense of the intense athletic accomplishment that is happening here. That
the tackle of Baren of the horse.
I'm blanking on the word. My brain's not working very well today. I've been sick.
A large jump is only so.
No, but what's the jump itself is not incredulous. You would be incredulous about it. What is the word to describe? But incredible things we think.
We've abused that word, so it doesn't really mean that anymore. But yes,
the incredible,
difficult to be believed.
Yes. The incredible leap of Beren, I feel on screen, would either look absurd or like not that big a deal.
That's the
Agreed.
thing. Is like I figured there's a very, very fine line between okay, he jumped, and then he came flying out of nowhere.
Right, exactly. Between
Right.
making
Unless
him
he
look
was
like
somehow
literally
standing
like
on
Superman.
a precipice above
Right,
Luthien
right.
for some reason.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I agree.
Which
And-
I think there's a painting kind of that suggests that somewhere.
yeah.
I forget who it was from. Anyway, but yeah. So having him leap sideways in such a way that he does catch Curufin in the leap, but also knocks the horse down in the process, possibly unceremoniously unseating Luthien in the process as well, which, you know,
I would think
She'll
not
be fine.
unceremoniously.
I'm
she's,
sure.
She's a dancer. She'll be fine. Like as long as
Okay.
the horse
so
goes
she
over
just somehow
like feet
like
first.
somersaults into a standing
Exactly.
position.
Yeah. She
Does
no,
a
she didn't even have
3-point landing. She does a 3-point superhero landing.
to- something like that. Yeah.
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 The point is, she's fine,
She's
Yes.
fine. Yeah.
but she
Yeah.
was always going to be fine in this scenario.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So, all right. So Celegorm is alarmed by Luthien being pulled onto his brother's horse, but he's going to go along with it. Again, thinking like, okay, that wouldn't have been my choice, but if we're making off with, but obviously, like taking her to safety, this is what we want to do, right? We wanted to. I'm, you know, it was my goal to be alone with her, and here we go. So, all right, fine. So he rolls with it. But now is where we get to my difficult part in this trajectory, right? Curufin is thrown down, and now you're Celegorm, and your brother is being strangled, being choked out by Baren, and it looks like Baren is going to kill him. So you're now going to come and beat Baren off of your brother, right?
Right.
Fine.
Right.
That makes enough sense. So but now's the
Bros
Huan moment,
before and all that.
right? Now's the Huan moment. No.
Yeah.
Huan gets between Luthien and Celegorm at some point here.
Right. That's what I'm trying to figure out where exactly, because he's going to attack.
Yeah.
So now Baren is in the process. He's doing violence to Curufin right now.
Okay.
So Celegorm is, if he was just going to show off before, is clearly
Like, now
now
he's
going
serious.
to actually perpetrate violence against Baren. Right.
Right. But what Baren does is chokes him. So
Yeah.
we leave the scene as soon as Curufin is no longer conscious, because Curufin's our point of view character.
Right.
Just
but
we are going to cut the
presumably
black here.
But I'm just thinking from Celegorm's
I know.
perspective all the way.
Obviously,
Celegorm's
Celegorm's-
got to be doing something in the interim. He's not going to just sit there and
Stand
let
there.
that happen.
I know.
Turns out that choking a person is not an instantaneous process.
I'm aware of
Not
that.
at all. Yeah.
I know.
So I think this is where Huan holds Celegorm at bay.
Okay, so part of the awkwardness here. So here's my problem. My problem is this doesn't seem the ideal time for Huan because
No, it wasn't supposed to be. It's supposed to be in the later scene.
right, because he's not coming between, because in that case he's only coming between Baren and Celegorm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But the other issue here is, if not now, then when? So let's just kind of table that for a second. Curufin, how does Curufin stop getting... So Baren chokes him unconscious and then leaves him?
No, he's going to take his weapons.
Well,
or,
he's going to
only take one of his weapons.
despoil him and then leave him, right?
Yeah,
he's going to take the
yeah.
knife. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
then tell them to leave.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they still have one horse that's still good. So the idea
Right.
was they're supposed to both get on a horse and go. But Huan needs to part ways with them before Celegorm
Before he
leaves.
gets on the horse. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So,
But nobody. The only violence directed at Luthien is the snatch. You know, the
And
snatch
then
when they-
onto the horse.
and then at the very end, when Curufin tries to shoot her.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But that's what I mean. Prior to that. I mean, if we want it to be prior to the shooting from horseback at the end, which is because we want the two different steps for Huan, right? First, I'm going to turn against you and prevent you doing the bad thing that you're planning to do. So that's the moment when Huan draws the line in the sand. But then, like, and I'm going to chase you afterwards is a second step, right?
So there are two things that Celegorm can do when the horse goes down. One is he could try to save Curufin from Baren. And two is he could go after Luthien, who presumably also fell off the horse.
Celegorm could.
Yes. So if Celegorm goes for Luthien and Huan steps between them, then now Celegorm is held at bay and can't be rescuing his brother. But the reason Huan is blocking his path is because he ran towards Luthien after an attempted abduction.
Right. Okay. I like this. So if in Celegorm's view, Baren and Curufin are wrestling, but like whatever, he has a low opinion of Baren anyway, so he's not gonna.
Presumably, Curufin's going to win this fight.
Exactly.
Doesn't need any
Right.
help.
So he's like whatever. Curufin's got the other guy who did like jump impressively, but whatever. Curufin's got him. I'm running after Luthien, and in his own mind now, he can still be. So what I like about how we're developing Celegorm here is he's still the hero of his own story, very clearly, right?
Right.
Multiple layers of like
Delusion.
abusive and narcissistic delusion, right? But he can still rationalize. So because like in his own mind, he's running after Luthien. She just like fell off a moving horse, right? Though again, presumably she stuck the landing. But still, he's running towards her. Huan and he are going to be seeing that situation differently, right? And Huan is the less delusional of the two, as it is clear that what Curufin was doing and what Celegorm is now currently, even if he is telling himself that he is like wanting to protect her and take her away from this or something,
That's not what she wanted, and that's not okay with Huan.
and abduction is clearly what was just happening and seems to be on hand. Anyway, Huan says enough is enough. This is the moment when he says enough is enough, but he does so non-violently. He just interposes himself, right?
Which shocks Celegorm.
Shocks Celegorm. Yeah, shocks Celegorm. Absolutely. Okay, so Celegorm is shocked, but not yet. Like, presumably, he still feels like this is some kind of misunderstanding with Huan that could be sorted out also, right? But anyway, he's upset. He can't. Huan's gonna, he can't, especially on foot, get around Huan, right? So he's got to abandon the running for Luthien thing. Then he turns around and now Curufin is choked out, right? Curufin's choked out. Baren is standing over his body and Huan is holding him at bay, right? Baren says, get on the horse, take your scumbag brother and get out of here, right? So Celegorm, seeing no other choice because Huan has turned on him, gets on the horse, pulls up Curufin, and they're going to leave. And he now behind his back, Curufin, who's behind in the horse? Is Celegorm in front on the horse?
He would have to be under the
I
circumstances.
would presume that Celegorm is the one riding the horse, and Curufin is just tagging along. Therefore, Curufin has free hands and access to wherever Celegorm's bow is, because Baren only took Curufin's weapons,
Curufin's weapons. Right.
not Celegorm's.
Right. Okay. So then behind Celegorm's back, Curufin shoots. Now, even if he were to become peripherally aware that Curufin is shooting his bow, he would assume he's shooting at Baren, probably. Right? Because Celegorm's
yes.
certainly not going to shoot at Luthien.
Right. And yeah, And obviously Baron's the one who just hurt Curufin. So
So
Celegorm,
Celegorm's not going to care.
or at least, yeah, not. He's not going to have the no, not Luthien reaction because he doesn't realize that's what's
Because
happening.
he wouldn't know. He wouldn't. I mean,
Right.
I would think he would assume. Like he would not even realize. And of course, he doesn't succeed in. Curufin doesn't succeed in hitting her, and his back is turned. Right. So he might even never know. He would know. He might know he's shooting a bow, but he would at least assume that he's shooting at Baren. I would think. Okay, and then, but 2 unsuccessful shots as far as he knows, or maybe he could even look back and see, oh, you hit Baren, great. I mean, like, okay, so then he rides away. So we can get Celegorm all the way to riding away on the horse with Curufin, consistent with his delusional idea that he is
of what's
still
going on.
Yeah, the dreamboat future husband of Luthien, right? I mean, that's okay. I think that can work. One of the other things that I was concerned about, one of the reasons I'm taking it through step by step like this, is I wanted to make sure it would make sense for the two of them to stay together.
Right. Obviously, if Celegorm realized that Curufin was shooting at Luthien, then
that would create problems. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So he can leave with his delusions intact. Now, back to Curufin.
Right.
Restart the scene. Okay.
He's headed to see Fingon because he needs to salvage something from his time in West Beleriand, which has been disastrous.
And now there's Baren and Luthien.
Right. The fact that his time in West Beleriand has been disastrous and he has everything to prove, and here are the people who kind of messed things up for him.
Yep.
Curufin is having some anger management issues throughout the entire scene.
Yes, for sure.
And so that's why I like him being a little bit surprised that they've stumbled upon Baren and Luthien, so that he can be reacting in the moment.
It's sort of more triggering because he's not expecting it. Yeah.
And also he's kind of like he's got to kind of look over at Celegorm and be like, these people again, why we don't need this in our lives. What are we doing here?
Yeah.
Right.
So
right.
Just
we had been turning the page, Celegorm. We were turning the page. Yeah. So there is also a kind of underlying frustration with his brother that he also brings into this scene at the start. Okay.
Right.
So you come in and you're Curufin. You come in and you yell abusive things at Luthien, right? Why are you yelling abusive things at Luthien? Just anger management? Like you're just venting your spleen because you're upset?
Yeah, like it's like
the reason his whole thing came collapsing down, the thing that made Oradreth kick him out of Nargothrond was Mablung's army showing up.
Right.
And Mablung's army showed up because Luthien
Luthien's fault. Yeah.
Wasn't really that into Celegorm.
Right.
So on one level, it's Luthien's fault this all happened.
Luthien's fault. Yeah.
And the reason is because of her strange obsession with her mortal boyfriend.
Yeah.
So let's say something
that's
really
clearly
scathing
Yep.
about her interest in this mortal, which has ruined everything.
Right.
Okay. Right.
So there's a little bit of cruelty because he's the one who
got it. Got it. Yep. Okay. So that all tracks. So he shouts. Celegorm starts riding towards Baren. Your Curufin, what are you thinking? He's gonna kill him? Like he's attacking him to kill? And he's like, so Curufin is responding as well.
Yeah, Curufin's
in his mind, it's Celegorm who's escalated things.
Right. The two of them didn't talk this through.
Yeah.
And he's like, all right, fine. We'll let's get her.
I kind of like the idea that both of them think the other one has escalated things, right?
Yes.
Celegorm thinks that Curufin has by snatching up Luthien, and Curufin thinks that Celegorm has by charging towards Baren in the first place.
When in fact,
he was going to just shout some insults, right?
Right.
Yeah. But
yeah,
they're just feeding off of each other. It's chaos.
Okay, so once he's gonna attack and kill Baren, Celegorm now decides I'm just gonna grab her. I'm going to grab her and throw her across my saddle bow. Why? Why am I doing this?
Because to punish Thingol, maybe?
To punish Thingol?
Yeah.
One, to get out of the situation and salvage it.
He could return her to Thingol.
Exactly. This is a bargaining chip.
Maybe.
The whole reason he got kicked out of Nargothrond was because they lost Luthien. He's got Luthien now.
He's not going to let her go.
Right.
Yeah.
But he can be the one who returns her to Doriath and gets back in people's good graces or whatever. But she was the key. Like, if she's the reason he fell apart, then she's the key to getting back what he had.
Yeah.
And so, maybe, like, the combination of the two things, that, like, she's the bargaining chip that could help him potentially salvage something, and he's also mad at her because it's all her fault in the first place. And so
he's going to drag her kicking and screaming.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, if she is not on board with this, that just is, like, better because she doesn't get a vote because it's all her fault anyway. And if she's upset about it, that's more satisfying. So, okay, great. So now there she is kicking and screaming across your saddle bow, and then Baren performs his astonishing athletic achievement and knocks you and the horse off the horse, right? And so they are, so now he's, you know, fisticuffs, whatever, with Baren, and Baren.
It turns out that Baren actually knows how to fight. This is not
it turns out that
Curufin
Baren
was
is
aware
not a
of.
wuss. So so Baren chokes him out. So then we, as Curufin, lose consciousness, which means we don't see Huon turning against Celegorm.
Right.
Importantly.
Yes.
Okay.
Because we see that in the other scene.
We might hear a bark, like, as he's getting choked out.
Celegorm's, or like, Huon's involved somehow, but we doesn't know how. Okay. So then he regains consciousness with Noldoran resilience, and only to find himself being hoisted up onto the back of Celegorm's horse by Celegorm. Right. So you're coming back into consciousness with a splitting headache, and you see Baren and Luthien standing there, and Huon nearby, but he's behind you. Maybe Huon is going to follow along. Who knows? It's not your dog anyway. You don't really care. So but he's still just really mad. So he's gonna shoot back, and he's gonna. So why are we shooting Luthien? We're shooting Luthien because he can't get her anyway. Right. So is this just like
he's mad at her?
He's
she
mad
was
at
a
her.
potential bargaining chip, but now apparently she's not coming with them, and they're leaving with nothing again. Yeah. And it's still all her fault.
And it's still all her fault.
And this is not a rational choice on Curufin's part.
Yeah. Right. And I think that Celegorm should know that he meant to shoot her. How that is accomplished, like, maybe he says something, you know, like, that indicates who it was he meant to shoot. Yeah. You know.
Well, if Curufin says anything afterwards about being angry that he missed, that'll be a giveaway.
Then Celegorm would be like, "You didn't miss. You hit him." Yeah. Yeah.
So. Yeah. Again, the question is if Curufin has the presence of mind to not give that away.
Yes.
But,
yes. Okay. Yeah.
Well, I think he thinks that his brother is delusional.
Which
is. Right, to think that, like Celegorm, this is not happening for you.
Right. Okay. So he, in an act of irrational rage, shoots at Luthien. And I have to think with half an idea that Baren might throw himself in front of her, in which case he shoots him, you know, like, either way, like, win-win situation.
He might have intended to shoot him next.
Yes. Or that's why I shot 2 arrows, because I figured you'd throw yourself in front of the first one and I'd shoot you, and the second one would hit her, right?
Right.
So he didn't count on Huon.
He didn't count on Huon because he didn't know that Huon had changed sides. And then Huon chases them, and he knows that Huon has changed sides. Okay. That works. That works. That all seems to track reasonably well. My last question about Celegorm and Curufin, because I know it's getting very late, so we need to wrap up pretty quickly here. My last question about Celegorm and Curufin is, what are their future relations with each other like?
If
How does this impact
Celegorm knows that Curufin meant to shoot her, like Curufin should be like really fed up with Celegorm for a long while, but he hasn't done anything. Like Celegorm hasn't done anything to him, right? He's just a real pain in the neck and an idiot.
He just needs managing all the time and can't be left
and it's exhausting,
yeah,
right?
I'd imagine it'd be exhausting for Curufin. Yeah.
If Celegorm knows that there was intent to kill Luthien, or if Celegorm believes that Curufin cost him Luthien,
yes,
right, he'll never really forgive him.
Yes.
Right. And I think that the later alliance, like they should be separated in the near ninth.
Yeah, I think
for the first time.
There should be some estrangement, I would think, between them after this.
When Curufin gets Celegorm to support him in the kinslaying, he's really got to work hard to sell him on it. Mm-hmm. And when he finally does, Celegorm's essentially like, fine, but I'll tell you this. I'd gladly kill you for free, essentially. Like,
right. They would each be blaming each other for the disastrous outcome of all of these events, and yeah.
We've managed to show Celegorm staying kind of outside of family politics for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's like, oh, just a bumbling idiot, so whatever. Like, he's just not paying attention to that kind of stuff. I think he's paying attention to this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I believe that Celegorm and Curufin are going to have a cooler relationship throughout the Nirnaeth, and to show that this kind of stuff isn't easily healed.
Right.
Like,
it's going to cost.
The Sons of Fëanor stick together because they have to, because of the oath, but it's not like they're all going to like each other at the end of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't necessarily all like each other at the beginning, but that's...
I mean, really, it's going to be, after this, it's going to be really just Maglor and Maedhros working together.
Buddies.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, we're splintering them a bit, and everyone's going to get injured in the near ninth.
Yes.
Of the Sons of Fëanor.
Yes.
None of them killed, but they're all going to get injured.
But all of them injured, yes.
And that is, again, I mean, we'll be able to do stuff with that.
Definitely.
Yeah. And the whole scene at the end of this where they return to Maedhros, and he is so fed up with all of them.
Yeah.
Because it's not just them. It's also Caranthir and his weird treasure obsession, and now Caranthir wants to play hardball with these dwarves. No. We're doing their deal.
Yeah.
Fine. You figure it out.
Okay. Yeah.
So help me, one of you will learn to work with another person.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Maedhros. And so where we're leaving Maedhros is deeply frustrated with the fact that he can't rely on anybody and he can't get anybody to work together effectively. And he is perceiving that now his hope had been that post Dagor Bragalach there would be the opportunity for them to, and now Fingon, his best friend, is High King, right? Surely now we can mend fences and work together, and all of his brothers are doing their level best to make everything as bad as possible for everything, and everything
Finrod
back.
is dead. The news they brought back is that Finrod is dead, and not only did they not prevent it, they kind of sort of caused it. Not entirely, but they certainly didn't help the situation. So Maedhros is very frustrated, and this is our way to set up the beginning of the unit.
He's gonna be like, okay, totally new approach.
I'm just taking control of, like, you guys just do the exact thing I tell you when I tell you to do it.
Yeah. you guys don't get a vote
Don't
anymore.
talk to anybody
Don't
else.
talk to anybody. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So yeah, the Union of Mithras is coming, and when that turns into the Near Knife, Mithras loses.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
he's gonna try a style of leadership that is a little bit more like Fëanor,
Right.
Mhm.
where it's what I say goes and you all do what I say, and this is it. Like there is no discussion here.
Yeah.
And when that doesn't work, he no longer can tell his brothers what to do.
While on the other hand, using a more Fingolfinian style of leadership with everybody else,
Getting
and so
everybody
that
to
kind
work
of
together,
weird dichotomy,
Mhm.
he's not able to maintain it.
It is his, yes. The Near Ninth is going to, or leading up to the Near Ninth, the Union, as you say, is going to be Mithras' big gambit, right? To try to unite the unification impulses of Fingolfin and his people with the strength of leadership of Fëanor, and it's gonna like almost work, but
but I think like it doesn't have to be that complete dichotomy. I think we can show some of that do it my way or else, even in his relationship with Fingon, because he can be super deferential, like, oh, you're High King, you make all the calls. So here's the deal. We've all sworn an oath, and there's a Silmarillion Doriath. So either we all attack Morgoth, or you figure out what's going to happen next.
Right, exactly.
Like, he could put that on the table for Fingon and be like, I'm not telling you anything, but
right.
Here's
I'm
my
not
idea.
Saying we're going to attack Doriath.
I think
I'm just
what
saying.
we could do is towards the end of this, like the closer we get to the battle itself, the more it's fraying at him, and the more autocratic he's getting with even his allies.
That's what I'm saying. It's like I want to show something of that autocratic nature slip into even his relationship with Fingon. It's not that he and Fingon are such good buddies. They plan this whole thing and they're like working together so great. There's a level of threat on the table and a level of, well, Finrod's dead, so it's got to be you kind of stuff. Like those kinds of conversations.
I like it, but we're now planning like half of season 7.
Let's not do that.
In 3 minutes,
tell
me the dwarf plot.
Go for it, Nick.
Yeah. So
Dwarf A and Dwarf B. The Adventures of Dwarf A and Dwarf B.
Dwarf A and Dwarf B. So I've kind of to do more of what we just said we weren't going to do a second ago. I have in mind this idea of planting pairs of normal guys for us to follow through the Near Ninth. In addition to our elf lords who are steadily dropping like flies. So to give us some boots on the ground to follow around. And this is our first pair. Are these two dudes. And they're just working on the siege line, man.
Blue-collar dwarves.
Just digging trenches. Like there's sergeants there, and when Glaurung tears out of Keep Hellborn, he just mows down their sergeant and leaves, and they're just standing there like that escalated quickly.
Right. Okay, so just to remind us, the dwarves were
besieging Keep Hellborn. Yes, they were keeping Glaurung in, who had zero intention of going anywhere.
Right.
And trying to figure out how they were going to deal with the situation, because like in The Hobbit, they didn't really think this through. They were just like, okay, so we'll all go out there and figure it out.
Right.
I guess. Right.
Okay.
And yet, yes, meow, indeed, they are indeed working class dwarves. Yes.
That's it. That's it.
And there's a scene where birds from Dorthonion come through, and they, what is all this nonsense? And they wind up going into Keep Hellborn and communicating with Glaurung, who lays out his evil plan for Dorthonion, right?
Right.
I got talked out of the the Lord of Tullingar House has failed. You know, like I wanted a whole big, soliloquy there, but apparently that was too overly melodramatic or something of that nature.
This is like a good dragon soliloquy. Come on, it's like, who says no? Well, anyway, okay,
it was
fine.
unpopular.
It was unpopular. Okay, well,
I mean, keep in mind that this scene is supposed to be mostly Dwarven point of view.
Yes,
but
yes.
What we're getting from Glaurung is that the birds from Angband present him with the opportunity to become Lord of Darthonian. Like, that's what Morgoth wants him to do. Like, stop wasting your time.
Dragon King, the Dragon Lord of Darthonian.
Right, right. Yeah. So then the decision scene has to come later, though. So when he's first being presented with this, he's got to be but I'm happy where I am. Why would I go anywhere?
Nice treasure here. I got a big hoard.
I'm good with what I got here, except he's not good with what he's got because he's a dragon. He wants more. And so what he wants more of is he could rule a realm of his own.
Right.
And have treasure. Right. So he figures that out.
And he begins to scheme, I'm going to make myself the Dragon King of all of Beleriand.
Mm-hmm. It's to obviously set up his later story as well.
Yeah.
But to see that it's difficult to talk Glaurung into things, but he's never going to be satisfied and he's always going to want more. So if you can dangle things in front of him.
Yes.
So this is Morgoth dangling something in front of Glaurung to see if he'll take the bait, and he does. And
so the dwarves retake Keep Helleborn and go to meet with Maedhros. These two guys deliver their terms, like, hey, so we took back Keep Helleborn for you. You're welcome. And we will happily enter into an arrangement where we will have joint control over the toll.
We will give you We will renegotiate our toll relationship and even give you back a portion of the treasure, which is here in Keep Helleborn.
Right.
Very generously.
And Caranthir is like livid, like foaming at the mouth.
I could easily imagine that. Yeah.
And Maedhros immediately nips in the butt. He's like, no, we are doing this. You are not taking soldiers over there to fight with these people over money.
Right.
Fix it.
Right. Okay. Got it. Okay. So again, this is Maedhros just at the end of his rope with his siblings.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Except for Maglar. Maglar's still great. But we'll have
except
to
for Maglar.
And Amros is like at least not breaking anything.
Just out down there living in a yurt and smoking weed or something, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
If you're not going to do anything helpful, at the least don't make anything worse.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Excellent. That was
6
pretty
minutes.
Much the impression I got. I did not. Yeah, we were a little over, but that's okay. 6 is just close enough. Looking forward to, are two dwarves ever going to get names?
Yeah.
There have been some suggestions, but
okay.
We'll get there. They're certainly going to be named by next season. So
yeah. David Michael Roberts points out, of course, I'm sure this has not escaped you before this point, but it is going to be a great deal of fun to devise fitting ends for the Sons of Fëanor, who largely die off screen, and they're just in a list of casualties. Basically.
Yeah, we know what happens to them. The question is, how is that going to matter to the story?
If I have my way, Caranthir will meet his end in the treasure vault, where Thingol himself was also killed.
I see. Okay.
But yeah, we get to kill a bunch of them off in Doriath, and the surviving twin in the Havens, and then obviously Tolkien wrote the deaths of the last two. So we do have some stuff to work with there. Yeah, it's mostly the Doriath situation where we have to figure out how they die.
Right. Yep.
And whether or not what who kills who
Right.
situation.
Right.
Because
Right. Yep. Oh, exactly. Exactly. Okay. But that is not even season 7, so we shan't go there this evening.
unless you want to say that Celegorm gets to kill Dior, and that has something to do with what happens in this episode, but that's
Oh,
neither
we
here nor
will
there.
see. We will see.
We
I'm
will
not.
see. Yeah.
I'm not gonna.
I'm not
gonna
asking for a
spoil that
decision.
yet. Yeah.
Yeah, no
there's
decisions yet.
No decisions yet. No decisions yet.
Speaking
Okay.
of which,
Yeah. Speaking of. Okay. Oh. Okay. So this is about this episode. Yeah.
this is just things that happen.
Things that happen. I missed the things that happen slide. Here, I thought I was. I totally thought I was advancing to the questions moving forward slide.
Oh yeah, sorry, I put that in there.
No, that's cool. Who on
it's
chooses
kind of-
Luthien and rejects
It's
Celegorm?
the theme of the
Yeah.
episode.
Right, the choice. Which so maybe the title should reflect that.
Yeah, that was why when you said, like, do you want a different title? I'm like, yes, I do, in fact, but I felt like I had to use Leap of Beren.
The
Something
choices
about
of
choosing.
Master Curufin.
Yeah, it's something.
Maybe not that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good. Good. All right. Well, we will. Cool. Well, I look forward to the follow up. The romance episode next time will be interesting. So, and that next time will be 2 weeks from tonight. Our next session will be on Thursday, February 23rd at 10 p.m. And we'll be discussing episode 9, when Baren and Luthien come back to the forefront and figure out who they are and what they're doing. And that's going to be the one that really turns towards the final sequence, right? It's going to be at the end of episode 9, we're going to be headed towards Angband, and we're going to be doing, so, we're after 9, we're into, Angband, and we're getting married, and we're hunting wolves, and we're going to Mandos, and all kinds of things, right? So, we start onto that final, but the whole point of episode 9 is how do we get onto that trajectory? So, that will be cool. And then the script discussion for episode 13, the final episode of the season, will be on Friday, March 3rd. So, of course, our script discussions, which is when Nick and Marie get together and just kind of brainstorm with people about, how the episode is going to go, laying the foundations that we're discussing here and reacting to here, that's what happens at the script discussions. Episode 13, March 3rd, Friday, March 3rd at 8 p.m. So we'll
No, Stephen, they're already well married by the time we get to episode 13. So
yeah, exactly. Yep.
but there will be burying.
Yep. Episode 13 is post-resurrection, right?
It's
yes,
including resurrection.
Including
Yeah,
resurrection.
the wedding ceremony is the end of 11. 12 opens with the wedding party. 12 closes with the death of Baren. 13, therefore, will have to include the death of Luthien and all the time in Mandos and the return.
Right.
So the resurrection will be in episode 13, obviously.
And Mandos. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
all the Mandos stuff
Right.
is in 13.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so you want to participate in the discussion as they figure out how to handle the Mandos scene? Friday, March 3rd at 8 p.m. That's when that's happening. So, okay, cool. Very good. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. So it's been we got a little carried away today talking about Celegorm and Curufin, but hey, it happens. You're talking about the Fëanorians, things get out of control sometimes. It's a known hazard. But very good. So thanks, everybody, for joining us. We will see you guys again in 2 weeks as we continue through season 6 into discussing episode 9. So thanks, everybody, for listening, and Godspeed.